6 is a quorum, or is over a quorum.
Yeah, let's go ahead and start.
A majority of the membership, so actually 5 is a quorum. Okay, we are good.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Time is now 3:32, and I hereby call the February 9th of 2021 meeting of the Area Plan Commission to order. Before I begin, I have a few announcements. This meeting is held in person and with Zoom video and teleconferencing option available. We will mute people calling in using Zoom video until the public hearing is opened. If you have two computer video window open or have a phone line active with a video window open at the same time, you will create an echo effect, making hearing you impossible. Please choose one option. In consultation with the St. Joseph County Health Department, the following protocols will be in place for all meetings held within the council chambers. Safe face coverings will be required for everyone in the chambers, including board members, petitioners, presenters, and members of the public. Seating in the chambers will be limited. Members from different households will need to maintain 6 feet physical distancing. Once your item has been discussed and voted on, please leave the chambers by the door in the rear of the room. The double doors should be used as an entrance only. Regarding public comment, I will first ask for any public comment from those sitting in the chambers and then the auxiliary seating. Once those in person have provided their comment, those calling into the meeting remotely will be given the opportunity to provide public comment. Those wishing to provide public comment in person should wait in line with footprint stickers before leading up to the podium. If hand sanitizer has been placed next to the podium, please ask that you sanitize your hands before and after leaving the podium. Sign-in sheets for public comment have been removed to prevent everyone from touching the same pen. For this reason, please clearly state your name and address. Please do not be surprised if you are asked to spell your name for the record. Your speaking time will not start until after this is done. We appreciate your compliance with these guidelines and for your patience as we navigate through these unprecedented times. Due to wearing face coverings and for your benefit of people listening over the phone, we ask the commission members to state their name when making a motion and a second. Now that the announcements are over, may we please have roll call?
Mr. Devon.
Present.
Mr. Hawley.
Present.
Mr. Lambright.
Present.
Ms. McCombs.
Present.
Mr. McNamara.
Here.
Mr. Moffett.
Here.
Ms. Rawls.
Present.
Dr. Thacker. Mr. Yule. 7 present.
7 members? Thank you. We are a 9-member commission, including 1 vacant, or no, we don't have a vacant position anymore. We are a 9-member commission, and we have 7 members present today. If any petitioner would prefer to have their petition heard when more members are present, they may ask the staff to have their item tabled for future meeting when more members might be present. We are going to start with an executive session since we got sidetracked last meeting with election of officers. Mitch?
Thank you. Mitch Oppenheimer, Council, or Commission Council. Because of what happened in January's meeting, we've decided to proceed with the election of officers for 2021 for the commission. I will conduct the election of the president and then turn it back over to the president for the selection of the other officers and the other committees that need to be appointed for the year. So at this point in time, the floor is open for nominations for any member to be nominated to be president of the APC for 2021. And so I would ask anybody of the commission to make any nominations for the position of president.
I, Elizabeth McCombs, nominate Adam Devine for the office of president.
Second, John McNamara.
Is there any other nominations for the vacancy or for the position? All right. Since Mr. Devon is the only nominated individual, instead of a vote, can we just do by voice vote the acceptance of Mr. Devon to serve as president for 2021?
Aye.
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 And I assume there's no opposed? Anybody opposed? That being completed, Mr. Devon has been elected as president, and I will turn it back over to Adam to proceed with the selection of the vice presidency seat and the other committee appointments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Last meeting, we had discussed having Bob Hawley as the vice president. Is there anyone else, or I guess, do we have any nominations for the vice presidency role?
I move we nominate Robert Hawley.
I'll second that. Elizabeth McCombs.
We have a motion, a second to nominate Bob Hawley for the vice presidency chair. Are there any other nominations or suggestions?
Move the nominations be closed.
Closed. All those in favor, state by saying aye.
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 Move
All those opposed?
we put the minutes of unanimous vote for Bob Hawley.
Thanks. Now we have the appointment of the executive committee, which consists of the president, vice president, and was it one other member? John.
I make the motion that John McNamara be on the executive committee.
This is Dr. Thacker.
Bob Hawley seconds that motion.
We got a motion, a second for John McNamara to be the additional executive committee chair. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none. I'll close this. All those in favor, state by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. McNamara will be the executive committee as well. Plat committee. Do you want me to do this, Abby, or do you want to run through this?
Sure. I believe we'd be asking for a motion for the appointment of the Plat Committee members. What we would recommend is John McNamara for member, John Lawfer alternate for Office of the Surveyor, for Engineering, Sky Meadows, Hannah Parkhill as the alternate. Representing the Building Department would be Randy James, alternate to be determined. And from the Fire Department, Dave Sharon with Ron Melser as the alternate. And then from the Health Department, Mark Espich with Brett Davis as the alternate.
I move we appoint that group.
I'll second that. Elizabeth McCombs.
Also, just a note too, it looks like Dr. Thacker did join us after the roll call, so welcome, Dr. Thacker. Thank you for joining us for the record. So we got a motion, a second to approve the Plat Committee as presented. All those in favor state by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And we have appointment of the APC members to the BZA. We have one municipal representative and one county representative. Currently, we have Bob Hawley as the county representative. That's been the ongoing member. We do have one other spot open. We have talked before, unless there's any other nominations, our new member, Town Council Representative Jim, is it Moffitt? Am I reading that wrong? Yeah. Anybody else? Or I guess we need a nomination, probably besides myself.
I nominate Jim Moffitt. Elizabeth McCombs.
I will second that, Jason Lambright.
We have a motion and a second. Hearing no other options for Bob Holly and Jim Moffett to be the APC members to the BZA board. All those in favor say by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That will conclude our executive session. May we now have public hearing. Reading for rezoning number A.
APC number 2948-20, a proposed ordinance of Wood Rental Properties LLC to zone from C Commercial District to C Commercial District. Property located at 10386 McKinley Highway, St. Joseph County.
All right, this is for C site plan specific to C non-site plan specific. And as you can see, this is a property along McKinley Highway. And as I use my pointer here, this is a property that's surrounded on all sides by residential abutting, and then across the street is residential. But it is kitty corner from C Commercial, and along the road, there's other C Commercial districts with I Industrial District to the northeast. This is a long-standing existing self-storage unit business, and the site plan that was approved is for a specific layout of buildings. The petitioner will explain how they wish to add additional units of storage. Here's a picture of the site as it exists from the road. You can't see it too easily from here, but in the background, there's construction material kind of stacked up right here, ready to go, with the intention of a unit, storage unit being built right here in the front. There used to be a house there for anyone who's used to that area, but that house has been demolished and removed. That's where the house would have been. This is where the new area is meant to be. This has been reviewed by the various agencies, and it comes to you with a favorable recommendation from the staff. And the 5 criteria that are used for determining if rezoning should happen are listed on the screen. The comprehensive plan, which this area is along a commercial corridor. The current conditions and character. Again, there's a mix of residential, commercial, and industrial in this corridor. Most desirable use. It already is an existing use, and we recommend continuing of its use. And conservation of property values. For this one, we note that the surrounding properties are residential, so it calls for a wider setback than is normally the case. With a residential use or residential district abutting a commercial use, the setback has to be 20 feet, and that's what the case is here. So when they go to apply for a building permit, they will have to apply for it to be 20 feet away from a neighboring property, and any kind of extra landscaping or any other checks to meet the development standards will occur when a building permit is applied for. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Do we have any questions by the commission at this time? Seeing none, may we have the presentation by the presentationer, please? Petitioner.
Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Floyd. I'm from Progressive Engineering. I represent the petitioner on this site. As you've already seen, we've already had submitted previously a site plan with our previous or our proposed layout. We've already been in contact with the Area Plan Commission on this one. We do need to do a little bit more work out there. We're gonna actually as-built the site from the original zoning site plan that you guys have on file. And then we're gonna update the council with the building plans that they've requested, as well as an updated site plan showing the new layout. Do you guys have any questions for us, or?
Any other questions by the commission at this time?
So they don't care about that.
Seeing none, the discussion will now be open to the public. First, is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of this petition? Please raise your hand, and we'll call on you to unmute.
I'm not seeing anyone.
Not seeing any? Anyone wishing to speak against this petition, please raise your hand and we'll unmute you and state your name.
Somebody has their hand up.
Craig?
Yeah, my name is Craig Anthony. I am the property adjacent to the west side. My address is 10412 McKinley Highway. From what I understand, I mean, the business is going to stay the same as it is now, which I have absolutely no problem with. What I do have a problem with is Stephanie mentioned that with this being a commercial district adjacent to residential, that there is a 20-foot setback from my property line, which is residential next to it. The previous buildings were not at 20 feet. I have talked with Randy at the building department, and I had Mr. Terry Lang come out and mark this property line. The two newest buildings, which are the ones towards the north side of this property, the closest to McKinley is already 4 feet from my property line. It runs at an angle. It's 4 feet in the front, 5 feet in the back. The building behind that is 6 feet from the property line, angled back to 7 feet at the back corner of that. So I'm a little leery that this 20-foot setback is going to go ahead. I mean, we haven't even been within the 8-foot setback, which I thought it was. And I'd probably be fine with 8 foot, but like I said, we're 4 feet from the property. And according to this piece of paper that announced this meeting on the back, that map right there, it says that those buildings are 8 feet away. They are not. And it says that this new building was going to be put in line, or I believe somebody told me that. It looks to me like if we keep following this line, we're going to end up with about 2 feet from my property out close to McKinley Highway. And I really do not want to see that happen.
Thanks, Craig. We'll address that when the petitioner has a chance to rebut that, so.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else wishing to speak against this petition, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I will now close this to the public.
Excuse
Oh.
me. I don't know if you people want to know this, but Mr. Anthony is operating a business out of the back end of the property that he
Are
is.
you, sir, are you
Excuse me.
part of the petition,
Dave
or
Dick-
who are you?
Dave Dickman. I'm the general contractor.
Okay, for the petition, or
How's that?
you're part of the petition?
Yes, I
Yes,
am.
correct.
Okay, if you could state your name and address and,
Dave Dickman, P.O. Box 295, Elkhart, Indiana, 46515.
okay, what are you,
Well, with all this,
Hey,
Mr. Anthony's confusion here about property lines, I just want to point out the fact that he's operating his business out of the back end of his property, and that's an R zone. And
No,
he's
I'm
been
not.
operating a business in an R zone out there, so I don't think he wants to ruffle too many feathers here, you know? It's just, if we're gonna be on the same team, let's get on the same team.
okay, I guess, I don't know if that really addresses his concern
That
with the
may be a
setbacks.
time for some other
There-
addressment. but,
The
you know.
concern is that if we're going to be adhering to the same zoning requirements for the commercial, then the neighboring property, since it's following the same kind of business plan, they should have to adhere to the same zoning requirements. But overall for this program, the intent was to get the rezoning done because this one was site plan specific.
Right.
When we turn in the rest of our application, there will be a variance application introduced because it is kind of tight there. So we will be asking for an amendment to the 20-foot rule. But we were told those are two separate meetings. This one, the first one, we needed to do get the rezoning done first because it is site plan specific, so no changes can be made on the site without getting this zoning amendment change. And then after that, when we submit the as-built and the current structures, because the proposed site plan that was turned in was incorrect with the building layout, that's when we would address the variance.
Yes, from the staff perspective, just to clarify, when Ryan and I reviewed the site plan that was submitted with the rezoning application, we also compared it against a site plan that was submitted as part of the commercial plan review, and there were some discrepancies. I reviewed and reached out to Stephanie and basically let her know that we would need an updated site plan that showed all the property as it was and then any improvements. And that any developmental deficiencies, whether they're setbacks or lack of, or insufficient parking or lack of landscaping, that they would have to be approved via developmental variances. So any deficiencies in terms of the developmental requirements will need variances.
So right now, we're just rezoning it, so it's not site plan specific, but,
Excuse me, this is Bob Hawley. Would you please identify yourself? I don't know who's speaking for what.
sorry, Bob, Adam,
I
I know
apologize,
you,
Bob.
I know you, pardon?
But this is
Who
Abby.
was the- Oh, Abby, okay, thank you. Thank
right
you.
now, this is Adam, we are addressing just eliminating the site plan specific rezoning. It's staying C commercial. But later, they're gonna come back for variances, potentially for setback requests, correct?
Setbacks and anything else that would be deficient in terms of the zoning ordinance requirements,
That's correct.
which would be approved by the Area Board of Zoning Appeals. You all are aware that we do have a combined hearing process, but that is not what's happening today. Today is just the rezoning petition.
Okay, was there, is there any other comments or questions? Any other comments, questions from the commission? If not, can we have a motion?
This is Jason Lambright. I make a motion that we send this to the county council with a favorable recommendation.
Elizabeth McCombs seconds that.
We have a motion and a second to send EPC 2948-20 to the county council with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor state by, well, are we gonna go, how are we voting? We're gonna go one by one?
No, you can, unless you have a discrepancy.
Okay. All those in favor state by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign.
So you're okay.
Motion carries.
Okay.
We have a reading of petition number 2.
APC number 2949-20, a proposed ordinance of 12555 State Road 23 LLC, CO Philip Gray to zone from C Commercial District to B Business District, property located at 12555 Adams Road, St. Joseph County.
So here we have a property that is currently Kreider Veterinary Clinic. They're in the process of moving to another site further to the west along State Route 23. The current zoning is also one that is site plan specific to the vet clinic. And as you can see on the map, all the surrounding properties in this area are B Business District. They kind of have a horseshoe around the parcel that's applying to be rezoned. And so this application is to make that center parcel, the one that's being proposed, to be Business District. That way it would remove the site plan specific nature of the current approval and be good for any B Business District, and then it would match all of the other zoning on this block. Here's a picture of the property from the north side looking towards the west. And that's the existing site. There's not any site changes that are contemplated on the site plan at this time. If there were to be any site plan changes, any kind of expansion or internal remodeling, that would go through commercial plan review, and we would, if there was any need for changes, we would address it at that time. But this is just for rezoning of the property. This comes to you with a favorable recommendation from the Area Plan Commission staff. This would basically just make this property match the properties around it on this block. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Ryan. Any questions by the commission at this time? Seeing none, may we have the presentation by the petitioner, please?
Terry Lang, Feeney and Associates. Our address is 715 South Michigan Street in South Bend, to represent the petitioner here. The petitioner has purchased the old Kreider Veterinary Clinic there and is proposing to have business uses in that facility. Kreider is currently leasing it for short term while the new facility is being finished, as Ryan had indicated, further down State Road 23 to the southwest. They also purchased the property immediately to the east of this site, which is currently business. And at this point in time, they would like to keep it all zoned business for future uses.
Thanks, Terry. Any other questions by the commission at this time? Seeing none, I will now open this up to the public. Anyone here or on the Zoom call wishing to speak in favor of this petition, please raise your hand and we'll unmute you. Seeing none, we will now ask anyone wishing to speak against this petition, please raise your hand. None. I will now close this open to the public. Any last questions by the commission or staff? If not, we have a motion.
I move we send it to the county council with a favorable recommendation.
I'll second that.
Bob
Elizabeth
Hawley,
McCombs.
We have a motion and a second to send APC 2949-20 to the county council with a favorable recommendation. All those in favor state by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. May we have a reading for petition number 3?
APC number 2950-21, a proposed ordinance of Dev 52694 State Road 933 LLC to zone from R Single Family District to C Commercial District, property located at 52694 State Road 933 Highway, St. Joseph County.
Okay, as you can see, this is along State Route 933. This is an existing car wash, and it's really only a sliver along the eastern edge of this property that's seeking to be rezoned to commercial so that the entire site would be developed together as a commercial zone site. All of the setbacks would have to remain the same for being adjacent to the residential property to the east. There's a picture of the existing car wash, but again, this is to be tore down with a new car wash layout as shown in the site plan. And the presenter for the petitioner will go over the details, but as it's shown here, there will be a row of full landscaping for trees in the back side before the edge with the residential property to the west, to the east. So this is really just for a sliver of property that is right here. The remaining of the property is already Zone C commercial, and this is just to make the entire lot whole for them to really just allow for this driveway right here to be part of the whole site. So really, the only part of concern for the proposal is the allowance of this driveway to go beyond that line, which is currently single-family residential right there. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Any questions by staff or commission, please? Seeing none, may we have the presentation by the petitioner, please?
Thank you. Mike Danch from Danch, Harner and Associates, 1643 Commerce Drive here in South Bend, representing the petitioner. This is one. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Mike.
Okay, sorry. What we're trying to do is clean up a situation. This is a lot in a subdivision that was done with a replat back in, I think, about 1996. And Schillings had their car wash put on the site. And unbeknownst to anyone, the last or the east 46 feet approximately was not Zone C commercial. Our petitioner, which is Drive and Shine, would like to raise the entire site and build a brand new up-to-date facility. And going through the research, what we found is that the back portion of what was called Lot A of a replat was still zoned residential. So what we ended up working with the staff, with the site plan that you see before you, to allow us to build the new facility. Drive and Shine probably will spend around $5 million to do this particular site. We will maintain the required landscape buffer, which doesn't exist right now, along that east property line. What we're also dealing with is that the city of South Bend has a municipal water line that also runs through the eastern portion of the property. And that's why you see the grass area that's just to the west of the evergreens that we're going to be planting there. We will be maintaining that as well. All the drainage will have to be brought up to today's standards. So we'll end up using the chamber system on this particular site. What we would ask for is the favorable recommendation for that east 46 feet approximately to make the entire site C commercial and to update this entire site to the latest zoning standards. And if you have any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer them.
Thanks, Mike. You mentioned they're gonna basically raise up the whole parcel. Is that correct? Is that gonna create any issues with the residents there to the east?
No, actually, what should happen is that it'll give them a better buffer than what they have right now. There'll be a larger grass area than what presently exists with the pavement. So they should be better off than what has been there for approximately the last couple of decades.
Thanks, Mike. Any other questions by the commission this time? Seeing none, I will now open this to the public. If there's anyone wishing to speak in favor of this petition, please raise your hand and we will unmute you. Seeing none, if there's anyone wishing to speak against this petition, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I will now close this to the public. Any last comments or questions by the commission? If not, can we have a motion?
Bob Hawley here. I'd like that we accept the petition as presented.
I'll second that. Elizabeth McCombs.
We have a motion, a second, to pass APC 2950-21 with a favorable recommendation to the county council, or well, no, wait, is this county council?
Dash
Yes,
20.
County council. All those in favor state by saying aye.
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 All those again, opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Before we begin, appeals for item B, Mitch, would you?
Thank you.
Make comment?
So because of the number of the commission members who may be newer to the APC, this is a petition for a primary approval for a major subdivision that was submitted and was presented to the Plat Committee. The Plat Committee held a hearing, issued a ruling on that petition, and the ruling of the Plat Committee has been appealed. The ordinance, the county ordinance that we have requires that any appeal be heard by the Area Plan Commission. And this hearing today, the commission shall consider this petition for primary approval as though the Plat Committee never acted upon it. The petition shall be considered in its entirety, and this is as if there was a new submission. I know that in the materials that you received a copy of the appeal that was filed by a remonstrator to the petition for primary approval, but the way that the ordinance that we have sets out, this will be basically a new hearing, and there'll be a presentation by the petitioner who's asking for primary approval, and then there'll be, Adam will provide for responses for and against the petition like is normally held with any petition. So I just wanted to make you aware of the fact that this will be basically a new hearing, and you are required to consider all the items in reference to the petition for the request for primary approval, and not just the items that are on the appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. And with this, typically for timing purposes, the petitioner gets 30 minutes, and then everyone wishing to speak for or against would get 5 minutes to speak. Since there has been an appeal for this petition, we're going to give the main person representing for the appeal as well 30 minutes to represent their case as well too. Well, everybody else will remain in 5 minutes.
Well, I think we're gonna have to have a motion.
We have to vote on that?
Motion to suspend the rule so that the person who filed the appeal will have equal time.
I move we allow the person equal time to respond.
I'll second that. Elizabeth McCombs.
We have a motion and a second to allow the representative that filed the appeal to have equal time as the petitioner.
Thank
All those
you.
in favor, state by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So do we have an actual reading then? Or do we just have the petition?
We're gonna have a staff
We have
report.
Per the bylaws, it follows the same procedure as a regular public hearing, so staff report would be first.
Staff report.
Yep.
Prior to when we begin, folks, since we don't have a full quorum and we are 8 of 9 members, can we table this until we have a full quorum? Do we have that option? Never mind. Mr. Ledoux said he'll go ahead and
And Matt was speaking on my behalf, and we'll go ahead and we're ready to address it today.
They can.
Then we will.
Okay.
We'll proceed.
Thank you.
Towards that end, this is Sean Klein with the staff at the Area Plan Commission. The subdivision of concern here is on the east side of Hickory Road, 660 feet north of Brick Road. Just to provide a little background as to how we got to this point, it was granted primary approval by the Plat Committee on January 21st. This was subject to an easement note that stated the rights and obligations that were in place in regards to the existing easement, which we'll touch on later, and Health Department requested revisions. This was going to be essentially satisfied before secondary approval would have been granted and then recording. This was then appealed to the APC by John and Joyce Ledoux on January 26, which was within the 5-day appeal period. And those are the property owners to the north of the subdivision in question. Just to reiterate what the Plan Commission's role in all of this is, on appeal, a subdivision is to be considered by the Area Plan Commission in its entirety as if it were a new subdivision submission. This comes from Section 153.315B of the St. Joseph County Subdivision Control Ordinance. And perhaps more importantly, per state law, the only issue a Plan Commission may address when reviewing a subdivision is if the subdivision meets the requirements of the subdivision ordinance. If the proposed subdivision complies with the standards in the subdivision control ordinance, the Plan Commission shall make written findings and a decision granting primary approval to the plat. In this way, APC is only authorized to consider arguments concerning conformance with the subdivision ordinance. The APC cannot deny the subdivision based on the impact on the rights and obligations of easement holders, nor grant any other remedies on these grounds. Therefore, the staff has assessed the arguments related only to subdivision ordinance compliance, and if the Area Plan Commission is satisfied that the subdivision complies with this ordinance, they must grant primary approval today. Turning to the first argument made in the appeal concerning compliance with the subdivision ordinance, that the county non-access easement was omitted or impermissibly modified. The staff finds this to be invalid. Non-access easements are routinely created and eliminated through the subdivision process. This is actually the only way that they are created. This happens routinely whenever subdivision lots abut an arterial or a major collector street. And essentially all it is the way that the county controls access onto these streets for new subdivision lots. It enables us to restrict them completely if possible, or if there's no other viable access, it allows us to determine safe locations and number of openings in this case. Since the plat is signed by the county and all of the relevant property owners within the subdivision, we find that this demonstrates an adequate acceptance of the altered non-access easement. And the subdivision ordinance states, at the discretion of the county, a 5-foot non-access easement may be required along any street proposed or existing, and that the county has full discretion to determine the width, location, and number of access points or drives across the non-access easement. The second argument that deals with conformance was that ALE Court cannot access Hickory without a variance. Again, the staff finds this argument to be invalid. There is no requirement that a variance must be granted or waiver, that is. One point of clarification, what's called a variance on older subdivisions and in the argument before us, we would today term a waiver. This is something that's granted by the Plat Committee or the Area Plan Commission, as opposed to what's now known as a variance, which can only come from the Area Board of Zoning Appeals. Anyway, there's no requirement in the subdivision ordinance or the zoning ordinance that a street cannot access another street. Therefore, waivers are only necessary when a lot is proposing to access a major arterial or major collector directly, not through a local street. We actually prefer the situation where a local street provides access rather than direct drives accessing the arterial. The third argument I'd like to address is that the variance allowing the Ledoux's driveway to access Hickory Road is omitted. This was since corrected. Proper procedure did dictate that the Plat Committee should have entertained a waiver to allow the southern 20 feet of the easement to continue to access Hickory Road. The petitioner has now requested this waiver, and staff recommends that this waiver be granted by the Area Plan Commission today. Since the Tokay Major subdivision first replat, which created the lot that now shares the easement with the property in question, was premised on its access being there, and since it's not a party to the present subdivision, no other viable access exists other than allowing it to continue to access Hickory. Since the northern half of the easement is not a party to the subdivision, it will continue to have access as before because there isn't a new subdivision altering that in any way. The next argument was that the private restrictions and obligations of the easement between Lot 1A and Lot 2A are omitted. This likewise has been corrected. A note has been added to the plat before us today that fully describes the rights and obligations. We find that it's for the benefit of Lot 1A and Lot 2A, and that the Tokay Major Subdivision First Replat further provides that the maintenance of the current driveway within the easement is the responsibility of owners 1A and 2A. And then the final argument has two parts. One alleges that since the ingress-egress easement is a private street, a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals would have been required. But when you examine the definition for street, it clearly says any public right-of-way or private easement, with the exception of alleys, essentially open to the sky and open and dedicated to the general public for the purposes of vehicular and pedestrian travel, affording access to abutting properties. The easement here, by its own creation, is not open to the general public. Therefore, it's what we would consider to be a private drive rather than a private street for the sake of the ordinance. The second part of this argument was the Outlot A. Essentially, there was an Outlot A to begin with. We had them join this on to Lot 1. Outlot A, taken by itself, it's true, it would not meet the development standards of the zoning ordinance and would be unbuildable. But when the Lot 1, as proposed today, is taken as a whole, it meets these development standards, and furthermore, it would meet all of the required setbacks and still allow for a single-family home to be constructed. An additional argument that I want to address, there was a drafting error with the prior submission, and as such, easement F did appear as though it went into Lot 1A of the former subdivision. This was entirely unintentional, and that error has now been addressed in the new subdivision. So now I just want to turn to a couple more technical requirements you'll want to take into account when considering this subdivision. It'll consist of 8 lots. The total area is 14.65 acres. There are no environmental hazard areas or wetlands present. The rights of way are correct as shown. It'll be served by private well and private septic. The county surveyor recommends approval. The county engineer's office recommends approval, as the applicant has demonstrated that the location of the new street opening complies with St. Joseph County and NDOT site distance standards. The health department recommends primary approval, but notes that revisions will need to be completed during the secondary approval process. The professional land surveyor, on behalf of the applicant, requests the following waiver from section 153-135H to allow a 20-foot opening in the 5-foot non-access easement for continued access onto Hickory Road for the southern 20 feet of the ingress-egress easement recorded on the Tokay Major Subdivision First Replat for instrument number 0627608. The staff has reviewed this subdivision and finds that if the waiver is granted, it complies with the requirements for primary approval as specified by the St. Joseph County Subdivision Control Ordinance. The staff therefore recommends that the subdivision be granted primary approval, subject to Health Department requested revisions necessary for secondary approval. And those revisions, as I mentioned, will be taken care of during the secondary approval process, which is a second required tier of review for major subdivisions. And when all the agencies are once again satisfied and the staff is satisfied that the plat that is submitted for secondary approval is in compliance, we will then grant secondary approval administratively, and the plat will be recorded. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Just for clarification, since it came to us for primary approval, is the planning commission, say we grant this, does it have to come back for secondary approval to the planning commission, or is that just the plat committee deals with the secondary?
It'll still be an administrative process through the staff.
It won't have to come back
Correct.
to the planning commission?
Correct.
With that, any other questions by the commission at this time?
So the petitioner makes his presentation.
So let's go ahead and have the presentation by the petitioner, please.
Hi, good afternoon. Mike Huber with Marsh Consultants, 315 West Jefferson Boulevard in South Bend, Indiana. Thank you so much for your time and your consideration of our request this afternoon. I think Sean did a really nice job of covering a lot of the how we got here. The Hickory Heights is a re-subdivision of lot of the Tokay Major Subdivision first replat. It's a 13-acre parcel that we're looking to create 8 new lots. The developer has worked extensively along with us in working with the county planning and engineering department to create a subdivision layout and really work to define the proposed road access location that meets all state and local safety standards. We verified this through the completion of 3 site distance studies that accommodate traffic exiting the subdivision, traffic turning left into the subdivision from the north, and then the traffic that would be approaching those vehicles waiting to enter the subdivision from the north to ensure that we have all the proper site distance standards met for the location of the proposed access for ALE Court prior to getting to this point. As mentioned to the staff, there have been a couple of revisions made to the plat from our primary approval at the plat committee to bring the plat into full compliance with the subdivision ordinance, including the request for the waiver to allow our portion of the 40-foot ingress-egress easement on the south side of the easement to cross the 5-foot non-access easement onto Hickory Road. Regarding that ingress-egress easement, we're aware of Mr. Ledoux's concerns about the possibility of 8 lots sharing the benefits and obligations of the easement. From the beginning, it's always been our intention for the rights and obligations of the easement to stay with proposed lot 1 in the subdivision, in which the easement is wholly contained. I'd like to point out we have yet to receive the health department comments or revisions that this is subject to, but we don't anticipate any reason why we wouldn't be able to comply with those moving forward to secondary plat. And I'd be happy to answer or address any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mike. With that, I will now, or I guess any last questions by the commission before we open it up? Seeing none, I will now open it up to anyone wishing to speak in favor of this petition. Please raise your hand.
The appeal party? The appeal party?
No, they're in opposition. No.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyone wishing to speak in favor of this petition, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I will now ask for the appeal.
Well,
right.
opposition.
Anyone wishing to speak against this petition?
I would. I'm John Ledoux.
Go ahead.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah. Go ahead and state your name and address for the record.
Yes, sir. My name's John Ledoux. My wife Joyce and I own Lot 1A in the current Tokay Major Subdivision first replat. And our address is 51770 Hickory Road. And Joyce and I are the ones that filed the appeal of the Plat Commission's primary approval of the proposed Hickory Heights subdivision. And you all just heard the list of some of the problems we saw with the original plan. And apparently a lot of those were corrected or attempted to be corrected on a new subdivision plat that we just saw yesterday, which was apparently created yesterday. So there's been some effort to make changes to the plan that we initially saw and then appealed. And so I won't go through all of the arguments that we raised on the appeal. They're there for you to look at. It is a little concerning that you make it an appeal and then the plan changes. And now when I'm addressing the appeal, it's kind of a moving target. But let me focus on one argument that I think is still not resolved. And it kind of picks up on something that Sean said earlier, and it's included in the staff report, which I had a chance to review yesterday as well. And the staff report says that, quote, the Area Plan Commission is not authorized to consider arguments related to the impact of a subdivision on the rights and obligations of easement holders. And I strongly disagree with that statement. In section 153-300 of your subdivision ordinance, it states that the provisions of the ordinance are, quote, not intended to abrogate existing easements. So when a proposed subdivision will abrogate or alter an existing easement, then I believe that the commission can and should consider arguments related to the subdivision's impact on existing easements. And that's really one of the main things we're trying to raise in our appeal. In this case, the developer's proposed subdivision will change the benefits and burdens of the existing easement for our driveway. And I appreciate what Mike just said about the intention to have the easement rights from lot 2A transferred to only lot 1. But when we asked about this earlier, that's not what we heard back from your staff. What we heard back from your staff was that the rights and benefits and the burdens of the easement would be transferred from lot 2A to all 8 lot holders of the new subdivision. I don't see how that can happen, but if it does, it certainly changes the rights and benefits of the existing easement. Instead of only 2 lot owners who are equally entitled to use the easement and equally required to maintain it, the proposed subdivision actually does away with lot 2A and replaces it with 8 new lots. So this changes the existing easement in a way that increases the burdens on me and Joyce to maintain it and increases the burden on the easement itself by potentially permitting 8 new families to travel and use the easement. That's not what it was originally created for. So it will be abrogated, it will be altered. And so if the commission decides to approve this plan, it will be doing exactly what Rule 153, Ordinance 153-300 says we shouldn't be able to do, which is to use the ordinance to change an existing easement, to abrogate an existing easement. And I appreciate that the developer added, Mike Huber and his team added note 11, which is basically says exactly what the old, that would be the replat, the first replat of the Tokay Major subdivision says. And I guess that was an effort to try to respond to our concerns. But the description really is no longer accurate. I mean, if the subdivision's approved, then lot 2A of the Tokay Major subdivision first replat will not exist anymore. It's replaced with lots 1 through 8 of Hickory Heights Estates major subdivision. So note 11 is at least confusing and clouds the title to our easement. So we still want to stand our ground on that. We don't think the commission should approve this subdivision because it alters the easement from what it was originally intended to be, which is 2 lot owners equally responsible for sharing the rights and benefits of the easement and the burden of maintaining it, and instead leaves open at least the possibility, as your staff interpreted, for there to be 8 potential families who could share the lot or the easement with Joyce and I. We feel pretty strongly about this. And I want to state for the record that if the commission follows the staff recommendation and grants primary approval of the subdivision, Joyce and I intend to seek judicial review of the commission's decision under Indiana Code 36-7-4-1600. It's my understanding that that judicial review, the appeal of the commission's decision, can be filed within 30 days, and we can ask for a court order to stay the commission's decision. We would also ask for an order enjoining the developer until the judicial proceedings are resolved. That said, I want to be clear with all of you folks, and especially with, want to say to Mike Huber as the representative of the developer, we don't really want to fight here. We proposed earlier a private solution to this. We're really concerned that lots of people will think that they can use our driveway when it was really only intended for 2 families. We're concerned that our driveway, which is small, will be used to transport excavating equipment and construction equipment. And we just, with the current description and the way that things are set up here, it makes it look like that might be okay. And we want to make sure that it's clear that it's not. And it doesn't make sense to leave that confusion when there's going to be a brand new road that will service all 8 lots. Use of our easement is unnecessary. So, we would prefer, a reasonable private resolution of this rather than hanging in there. But as long as there's this confusion and kind of cloud about what are our rights and what are other people's rights to use the easement, we're going to keep looking for a final solution on it. Thanks. That's all I had.
Thank you, John. Is there anyone else online wishing to speak against this petition? Please raise your hand.
Yes, this is Bill Stavoli. Trying to get my camera to work here, sorry. Yep, not working. In any event, I live just to the south on Hickory Road of the proposed development. I'm at 51906 Hickory Road. And I guess the reason I'd like to speak is a couple things. First, I note that the sign that is going to go for Hickory Heights, which is on the staff that's up on the staff drawing that's up on the screen, or I should say the plat drawing that's up on the screen, is listed as H, and it looks like it's going to be right on my property line. I think that's, I don't know what is going on there, but it seems like that is inappropriate. Sorry about that. My camera is giving me all kinds of problems today. The other thing is, with respect to the site I think the site distance standards, this development was first proposed back in I think, I don't know, sometime in early 2000, and the engineering department indicated that it wasn't feasible because of the way that the driveway was going to be positioned and the safety factor of people coming down Hickory. And I understand from Mr. Huber that apparently they ran some calculations and they now claim that it's safe. In my discussions with the engineering department, they never checked those calculations, number one. And the other thing I'm concerned about is that they ran those calculations based off of the posted speed limit on Hickory, but having lived on Hickory, I can assure you that no one goes the posted speed limit. There is a huge safety factor if you put a development right there. I will guarantee you there is going to be accidents at that development. People coming over that ridge are never going to be able to stop for people turning left into that development coming from the north. It's going to be a problem. And that is why the engineering department said, no, it was a safety problem back when the development was first proposed. And I just want to make the commission aware of that, because I seriously question whether that is satisfied. And I'm concerned with what's going to happen with that development right there, and the people trying to get in and out of that driveway with the people the way that they drive down Hickory Road. So those are my two concerns. I just wanted to make the commission aware of it, and I would ask that that this be further studied before something like this gets approved.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak against this petition? Please raise your hand. Seeing none, I will now have a
Wait a minute.
chance for the, oh, do we have somebody else in present? Okay. Oh, okay. Go ahead. We have somebody here from the engineering department wishing to speak.
This is Sky Metters, interim county engineer with offices on the 7th and 11th floor of this building. These site calculations, originally when this subdivision was shown, we did make the comment that Mr. Stavoli mentioned, and we had concerns with the site distance. That is why Marsh Consultants and the developer went out and did some surveying, and then also provided an analysis showing that those site calculations did meet county and NDOT criteria. And we did look at those calculations to make sure that those were done per NDOT standards. Just wanted to make sure that that was on the record.
Thank you, Sky. We also have a chance for the petitioner to rebut.
Yes, thanks. And I appreciate the clarification and the affirmation from county engineering related to the site distance issue. That is correct. I'm not aware of anything done in 2000. I know we first approached engineering in 2019 with a plat drawing that looks similar to this, and they did express that concern, and that's what drove us to conduct the studies that we did conduct in order to make sure we were in compliance with the standards. As it relates to the Mr. Ledoux's concerns about the use of the easement, again, it's not our intention to have 8 families, using this easement or having access or obligations to this easement. It's an easement that our client maintains now as the owner of the property. And whatever the appropriate method would be, our intent, as I mentioned, is to convey that along with Lot 1A, within which it's wholly contained. If that's if that's an amendment to the note on this plat drawing, or if that's managed through the homeowners association documents that get recorded once we get to that section of the secondary plat and those pieces, we're open to the appropriate mechanism for which that actually takes place. But that is our intention, is to have the easement obligations and benefits be retained as they are currently, and have them go only with Lot 1, proposed Lot 1 of the subdivision. So, again, working with, before any secondary platting would be allowed, we would work to make sure whether it's the appropriate mechanism is the plat, or if it's HOA documents or some other recorded easement document, then that's what we would pursue.
Thank you, Mike. Any other comments or questions by the commission at this time?
Yeah.
Who are you?
I have
Can you identify?
been on the plat committee and been on the plan commission. My name is John McNamara. I'm the county surveyor. Thank you. I have been on the plat committee forever and on the plan commission for a long time. I find no problems at all with this subdivision. I think the staff has answered every question that was raised adequately. And therefore, I would make a motion that we approve this subdivision.
Thank you, John. Anybody else comment, or do we have a
Can I
second?
comment? Elizabeth McCombs?
Is that a comment or is that a second? Sorry.
No, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can I ask for clarification on voting on easements through area plan, and that also what was mentioned, item 11, maybe from Attorney Oppenheimer, and how that goes with area plan?
I'm not quite sure what, what is your question?
Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I'm not quite sure what your question is.
Because Mr. Ledoux had mentioned that area plan is not allowed to vote on easements and quoted, I believe it was 151, it was chapters right out of the area plan. So I wanted clarification on that.
Well, I don't know that we're voting on an easement. I think the issue is that Mr. Ledoux is raising the issue that if you give primary approval to the subdivision, that does in fact impact the easement that is in existence. So you're not voting on the easement per se. I think that the remonstrance concerns the impact that that will have on the easement.
Thank you.
So the easement's already currently there. We're just.
Correct.
Get that clarified.
Correct.
That's correct. The easement is there. And I think the remonstrator's position is that the granting of this approval will negatively impact the easement.
And it's staff's
Thank you.
position that that might be possible, but this isn't the venue to make that determination.
So all right now, we're voting on if we want to give primary plat approval, where some of these other details can get worked out before secondary approval.
And I think that has been the, as Mr. Ledoux mentions, it's my understanding, I wasn't involved in the plat committee or the early stages of this matter. By the way, I'm Mitch Oppenheimer. But shortly after the plat committee hearing, I was contacted by staff, and we've had some discussions since the plat meeting. And it is my understanding, like Mr. Ledoux indicates, there has been private conversations about possible resolutions of the matter. He mentioned it today. Mr. Hubner from the Petitioner has mentioned it as well. And I think that part of the reasoning of what occurred at the plat committee was that some of these details, or any of the details concerning Mr. Ledoux and his wife, hopefully would be worked out at between the time of primary approval and the secondary approval, when the issues about the easement and the assignment possibly to Lot 1 of the new subdivision, all those matters would be worked out before there is a secondary approval, which is the final approval. This is one step in basically a two-step process. This is a primary approval, then the issues that have to be resolved are resolved. There will be a secondary approval, and only at that time, after secondary approval, which is administratively done by the APC staff, only at that point in time would the plat be recorded and become of record.
Right.
So there is still theoretically work to be done. And I think it is hoped by the staff and certainly by the plat committee that some of these issues that Mr. Ledoux and his wife bring up are resolved during that period of time. So the issue that you have in front of you today is the first step in this process, where you give it primary approval, and there's other steps to be taken as this proceeds.
Right.
Okay,
With
thank
that
you.
being said, Mitch, this is Bob Hawley. I would like to second John McNamara's motion.
Thank you, Bob. Elizabeth, before we vote, did you have any other, did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Could we get a motion on the waivers first? The waiver, just keep everything.
Could you explain what the waiver is?
Yes. Okay, so in order to continue to provide the easement, the access to Hickory, we need to approve a waiver from to cross the 5-foot non-access easement. because that 5-foot non-access easement is automatically required by the ordinance. But we routinely grant waivers where it's necessary to continue to provide access to the lot, as it is with the case of Mr. Ledoux's property in this case.
Need a motion.
We need a motion to approve the
The waiver,
existence of the road that crosses the non-access easement.
so it can continue to cross the non-access easement.
The waiver concerns the ability
Okay.
to
I
continue the
move
use
we
of the
approve the
easement.
waiver to allow the road to access onto Hickory Road.
The
Bob
driveway
Hawley
easement.
seconds that motion.
We have a motion and a second to approve the waiver. All those in favor, say by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carried.
Motion carries. Now I heard one. Correct?
There was somebody who voted against, is that correct?
One person voted against the waiver.
Okay, so the motion passes.
And we have 8 members, right, so motion passes.
Now, back to my original motion, I move we approve the primary submittal.
Primary approval to the subdivision.
Yeah, I move we give primary approval to the subdivision.
I'll second that.
Bob Hawley seconds.
We have a motion and a second to send,
No.
oh, no, we don't send it to county. So a motion and a second to approve primary approval for the subdivision. All those in favor state by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. We have an item not requiring a public hearing.
Yes, Crystal Welsh with Abbenmarsh is on. She is going to give a presentation, a brief presentation on the 933 corridor study. This is a study that the Redevelopment Commission retained Abbenmarsh to do. They presented their findings on the study at Redevelopment Commission this morning and wanted to share the presentation with you all today.
Good afternoon, Crystal Welsh with Abbenmarsh, and thank you. I know you've had a long meeting, so we'll keep this brief. But I will say that this can be a first conversation. There's a lot of really good, we think a lot of really good recommendations that have been vetted through some stakeholder engagement, and hoping that this study will help improve the corridor. If you want to go to the next slide, thank you again for allowing us to be here today. I do want this to be as interactive as possible, so feel free to stop me, make a comment. If you don't feel like making a comment publicly, you can email me or call me. Our information will be at the end of the study. The purpose of the 933 corridor study was really to start with conducting an assessment of the existing conditions in the corridor, and then develop a strategy for improvements, redevelopment and beautification. The intent really was that this study would provide a guide for the St. Joseph County Redevelopment Commission, the Department of Infrastructure Planning and Growth, on making public decisions and policies related to the corridor. In addition to that, we thought this study could provide a catalyst for a clear and united vision for the community, both public and private, to work together on revitalizing the corridor. And that's one reason when we get into the content as well as the format of the study, we think we've hit that mark. Next slide. So once we met several times with county staff. In addition to that, we also wanted to kind of vet our recommendations with a group of folks who had skin in the game along the corridor, and that included current property owners, developers, real estate professionals, the universities and colleges along the corridor, as well as government representatives. And we did that through a series of Zoom meetings, given the current climate. That was the way we could do that. Next slide. We held 4 different meetings, They were focused around a topic, but anyone could have participated. Any of the invited stakeholders could have participated in any of the meetings, but we really tried to focus and invite folks to certain ones. And so we had 7 who participated in the business interest, that included the chamber, 9 with the corridor universities and colleges, 12 with real estate and development community, and then 13 with government officials, including Town of Roseland, Clay Township, and NDOT. Go ahead. And so the content of the study really focuses on an executive summary that includes an implementation phasing process. Staff thought this was very important because there's a lot of recommendations in this study, but this implementation phasing kind of provides a roadmap on how to get started and make some progress towards the ultimate goals and recommendations that are outlined. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that as you can see in the illustrations, the corridor is a very long area. It's not a small area. It's extensive. And so as we did that, we found that we were making recommendations for the corridor itself, kind of the general nature and conditions. But we found that along the route, the character of that district or of the corridor changes as you move north and south. And so we wanted to take the extra effort and kind of dive into each of these areas. And these areas were kind of identified as major intersections and kind of character zones. And so in addition to the overall corridor study, there are 5 district studies involved, which really focus individually on the recommendations that are outlined in the corridor, but physically placing those recommendations within those districts and trying to make the district study very usable for people who either are interested in buying or already own property along the corridor in any one of these districts, that it would be a more specialized report for them. And then there's a large appendix as well. And so the recommendation implementation phasing is really designed, again, to be that roadmap to kind of help staff and participants, property owners, developers, kind of get started. And so you're not looking at everything all at once. We've got short-term goals, which are things that are pretty quick, forming committees, getting some communication strategies put in place. We have the medium term, which outline are really activities that need a little bit of preliminary work or maybe a committee report before they can move forward. And then the long-term strategy really is things that require legislative change, major implementation and planning that would happen in the other 2 phases, or kind of a long-term approach. And we can go into a prime example of one of those. Maybe we have a recommendation related to enhancing corridor connectivity to the trail system. That's one of the recommendations in the mobility and infrastructure section. And so we have a short-term goal, which really focuses on connecting and communicating with INM related to the fact that they own a strip of property between the trail and the rear of the properties along State Road 933. And so a short-term goal is communicating and discussing the availability of either easements or some way that people can cross the INM property to get back and forth between the trail and the adjacent property. So that's the short-term goal. Let's get in contact with them and see what we can do. The second would be the medium term for that same activity would be to actually come up with a strategy, whether it's easements, dedication, some sort of strategy that actually would allow legal transfer of folks across that individually and privately owned property by INM. And then the long term would be to continue communications and add additional infrastructure and trail lines in the corridor in a kind of coordinated effort. So on that one strategy, which is enhance corridor connectivity in the trail system, we have a short, medium, and a long-term goal for that, or phasing. So I wanted to kind of give you an example of what that looks like. Strengths and opportunities were really important to start the baseline of the conversation, kind of see what's going on right now, and also kind of be a little bit aspirational of what we think might be able to occur. if we got together and worked towards a positive goal. You know, one of the key strengths is that this is a major thoroughfare, and there's a lot of traffic. It's great connectivity between Michigan and South Bend, as well as off of the toll road into the community. There are a ton of public assets, including the university and 2 colleges, but also parks, the trail system, as we mentioned. There's a lot of very positive things in this area that may not be kind of promoted. And then another important item we saw was that there is existing sidewalks through the entire corridor, which is amazing, and it's a great asset. They may not be used to their full advantage, but it's there, as well as transpo bus routes serving the area, really open up multimodal opportunities for the trail or for the corridor. Move on. And then opportunities, you know, that traffic is really a kind of a double-edged sword. It brings a lot of people through the corridor, but it can also create pedestrian, bicyclist, and vehicle conflicts. And so that's a large part of the study, looking at ways to make the corridor friendly to other users besides a vehicle. Not that the intent is to change it to not serve as a major thoroughfare, but what things can we do to help kind of make it a positive environment for multiple ways to get around. Also, one of the other issues we found is, again, we identified all these great parks and trails and cultural assets, but they're not readily visible from the corridor. So they're not necessarily, people don't see them as they're driving back and forth. They don't identify them as being in this corridor or an asset to the corridor. And then, as I mentioned before, many of the buildings along the LaSalle Trail don't take advantage of the fact that they're on the trail. And the part of that may be that limited access due to that private property owner between the trail and their land, but really kind of coming up with a strategy to overcome that. Again? And so, is there any questions before we jump into the recommendations? I know you guys have had a long meeting. I don't want to delay the point, but all right, so we'll jump right in. So the corridor recommendations are really broken up, and this is for the corridor study as well as the district studies. They're broken up into 5 major classifications. We have mobility and infrastructure, parks, trails, and cultural amenities, marketing and corridor identification, investment and incentives, and real estate development. So the first is the mobility and infrastructure. And so these are the main recommendations. And one I'll identify here is develop a strategy to reduce pedestrian and vehicular conflicts. That was something that came out pretty quickly. And so a couple of those items that we've identified to help this strategy move forward is to improve sidewalk maintenance. I did walk the entire corridor, not in one day, but I did walk the entire corridor, and there's a lot of debris on the sidewalks. It's a great asset, but maintenance could really help improve the pedestrian experience along the corridor. Other
Can I
things.
make a comment?
Sure. Hi.
Hi, Elizabeth McCombs, Town of Roseland. I absolutely am on board with getting the sidewalks cleaned up. The problem is that Indiana State owns the highway. They do contract with county, and they don't come out unless we call, and it's usually once a year.
Mm-hmm.
That's not enough.
No. And just if you want to take a little bit of a deep dive into that, again, looking at ways to move the needle on this issue. Although we would love the state to be more involved and provide additional resources for that, that may be a longer term goal, and as communications continue, that might be possible. But one of the strategies that we came up with to help specifically on the maintenance issue is maybe something like an adopt a highway approach or adopt a sidewalk approach, in which we get volunteers who have some skin in the game, who are very interested in this area. And again, it will require coordination. It will require people communicating and working together. But is there a way to come up with a strategy in which we might be able to clean the sidewalks twice a year or 3 times a year, if we can get a volunteer group of people together to help do that. And kind of out of the box approaches like that, I think are really important. We're not saying it's going to happen tomorrow, but thinking of those opportunities that might do multiple things. One, you get a cleaner sidewalk, that's great, but it also might build support and camaraderie on the property owners and the users of this corridor to see the volunteers out there working together. And so totally get that this is an issue, but it's an important issue.
When you put 100,000 plus people through the town of Roseland for a Notre Dame football game, it gets quite messy out here.
Yes. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. So I appreciate that. And again, please jump in anytime you've got a comment. And Ms. McCombs, thank you for participating in our stakeholder group as well. Great comments through that process. And so we do appreciate the time you've spent already reviewing this study. If there's nothing else, we'll move on. Parks, trails, and cultural amenities. As we mentioned, and you can kind of see in the map that's on the side, those 2 big blobs are parks. And so there are some great park assets along the corridor. And trying to come up with a strategy in which we can connect the corridor and those cultural assets, whether it's through trails, through the regular road system. We think it's really, really important for the corridor to take advantage of the fact of its proximity to these assets. They're there, we should use them. So one of the strategies that we came up with for this recommendation was to potentially have "You're Here" signage. And so whether you're at a park, at Roseland Town Park, or you're at St. Pat's Park, or you're on the corridor, there would be signage that would reflect the fact that you're close to other things. And so if you're on the trail, it might be, hey, go over here to Roseland Town Center and enjoy restaurants and other things that the town may have. If you're on the corridor at an intersection that has a pedestrian crossing, it might say, turn left here, or turn right here to get on the LaSalle Trail. So really connecting the two so that you don't have a corridor and a trail and cultural assets, that they're integrated. And so we thought that was really important, and that was kind of a fun way to do it. And Rob DeClean with the chamber also mentioned that they have already started to think about some signage and how signage might improve the use of the cultural amenities in this area. Again, building up that corridor marketing and corridor identification process, kind of looking at some interesting ways that signage can be done, but not just standard signs like, oh, here's another sign, but really thinking at things like maybe incorporating signage and placemaking in the multimodal transportation hubs that are suggested. Things like adding bus stops and bike racks. Those are great spaces to put additional promotion and corridor identification strategy, kind of put information there to be used. It's kind of double duty. It's providing a public service, but it's also reinforcing the character and marketing. Go ahead.
The town of Roseland already has plans to put in brick digital signs down by the toll road on the south, going south on 933 and on Cleveland at 933. So we covered that.
Great. And things like that where the town can kind of act as the leader and kind of set the standard and set that makes a whole lot of sense in this area. Go town of Roseland. All right. Yeah, you can move that slide forward now. Thank you. Investments and incentives. Again, one of the main purposes for this study is to identify ways to help redevelop, continue to develop the corridor itself for property values. We want to make sure that good development that meets the community's desires and characters are put in place here. And as properties develop, we want to be sure that it's doing that with a vision. On the other hand, sometimes private developers need a little help. And that's where the investment and incentives section of this study comes into place. And we're one of the main things, and we talked about this in the Redevelopment Commission meeting today, would be the establishment of a tax increment finance or a economic development area. Go ahead.
Roseland cannot be part of a TIF district. If you read the law, the first line of the law says you shall have a 5-member board. Roseland only has a 3-member board, so we cannot be part of that. The history of Roseland already got in trouble with that during the Snyder era, so we're not revisiting that. Thank you.
Okay, good to know. But again, the intent would be to look at that as an opportunity, not only for funding, but also to develop a project-based plan that would look at ways to make local public improvements to help spur economic development and can continue the progress of the area. The other thing I'll mention is that in several parts of the study, you will see that we identify the need for benchmarks and performance measures. If you don't know what you're measuring, you can't tell if you've succeeded. So it's very important during the development of programs that you decide how you want to track it and what's the importance to your community about what means success for you and how are you going to measure that. And so that's one thing you'll see in multiple of these recommendations is that you need to be able to tell people when you're successful. All right. And last but not least, real estate development. As mentioned, we want businesses to be successful along the corridor. This is in most places a commercial corridor, but there is quite a bit of residential development along the corridor itself as well. And so looking not only at those traditional business uses, but also what opportunities might be out there for multifamily residential along the corridor, and trying to spur and bolster some of the lower density residential in the neighborhoods just outside the corridor. I will mention we looked at the corridor itself at 1 mile, which is a half mile on either side, and then we also did it at 2 miles, which is 1 mile on either side, because the corridor doesn't live in a vacuum. It is impacted by the area surrounding it. And so there are a lot of very strong residential neighborhoods just out off the corridor itself, which help to support the business and development that happens along the corridor. So looking at housing is a real economic development opportunity for real estate in this area. I will say one of the recommendations in the mobility and infrastructure has to do with utilities. The utilities in the area really are going to limit development. So you can tell in the Darden South Commercial District, there's been quite a bit of development recently. And that's because there's access to utilities in most of that area. As you move farther north, the availability of utilities will really limit the intensity of development along that and what kind of things can go there. So really looking at the ability to market property or for current property owners to develop property is going to be based a lot on utility availability. And then we mentioned before that we have our 5 districts. Michigan Gateway, this is south or north moving south. Darden North Commercial District, Darden South Commercial District, Roseland District, which we didn't call it Town of Roseland because it's larger than that, but Town of Roseland is the meat and potatoes of that area. And then the Tri-Campus District, which includes the universities and Notre Dame, as well as St. Mary's and Holy Cross. And then the appendices. It's about a 200-page document, but we wanted to be able to give the information we used to the right people so that they can make good decisions. And so it's very extensive, but I think it's important to be able to share that not only with staff and decision makers at the county, but also with the general public, so that they may be able to pull and utilize this information. Property owners might be able to use this information to make good decisions and or help potentially market or develop their property. And so there's my information. Mike Huber's on the line as well. And John Lynn, also with Avonmarsh, is here. If you have any questions or comments related to that, I will mention the format as well of the document. this was something that came out of the stakeholders meeting, which was really great feedback. We have actually provided the county 2 formats of the plan. One is set up like a booklet so that you have like a 2-page spread that you can read. That's the way it's designed to be read. And that will be for the more of the user that's going to read this thing online. In addition to that, each one of the studies is provided in a single-page format, more for somebody who might be looking to print the document off. So hopefully those 2 formats will allow people to kind of to digest the information in a way that makes sense to them and is more practical for them. And I did talk to Chris Brown today, and they are working on uploading all this information onto the St. Joe County's website.
Thank you, Crystal. What are we looking to do?
And I'm open for questions or.
So Abby Wiles with the Area Plan Commission. Nothing at this time, but Crystal talked about a number of things that might eventually impact the Area Plan Commissions, specifically encouraging good development along the corridor. Maybe that's looking at our zoning ordinance regulations and developing a special overlay for that section, or even looking at our commercial district, and then talking about intensity of uses. So a lot of the recommendations in this study could be a jumping off point to do more work with our zoning ordinance.
I would agree.
Yeah, and this will, of course, be used as we move forward with the comprehensive planning process, because all plans and studies that the county has done recently will need to be referenced and considered in that planning process.
Again, thank you all for taking the opportunity. We think we have a pretty awesome study here, and we hope you have the opportunity to be able to use it. And any comments, please let me know.
Thank you, Crystal. Any questions from the
Thank you.
commission? Thank you. Put on ABC bylaws. No?
Ryan will present the proposed change to the bylaws.
Certainly.
Change.
So it's towards the end of the packet, it's right before the minutes. The last 4 pages of the packet are the minutes, and then there's the last page before that. And there's 2 different areas that we're suggesting that you guys consider for bylaws amendments. The first one is in the interested parties section, which is Article 11 of the bylaws. With the adoption of the new subdivision ordinance, we've removed the type 3 corrective plats. So that's no longer an existing thing. So we're recommending its elimination in that line list. And then also we've eliminated the type 1 and type 2 corrective plats. So because those no longer exist, we're recommending the elimination of those from the list. And so that's part 1. Part 2 is additionally, some time ago, back when Larry was still here, he instituted a change so that whenever we have a rezoning case, staff is the party that goes out and puts up those yellow reflective signs that say that a zoning hearing is coming up. And it used to be where the petitioner was responsible for that, but because we already had, staff already had it to visit the site, to take pictures and check the site so we could do our staff report, it just made sense for staff to do that, make sure that it gets put out there and we're able to document it. And so we just noticed that that change hasn't happened yet, so it still talks about where the petitioner is required, and we're just suggesting you change that to the staff shall post the signs. And there's just a few little cleanups along with that. And this is what we're asking you to consider, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ryan. Any concerns or questions, Mitch? On any
No.
changes? Yeah.
Fully in favor.
I would maybe just add one more thing. I think there was one change that we talked about that failed to make it into this version. The very last sentence says, "The sign shall be removed by the staff within 15 days of the final decision by the legislative body." Since this is going to be just a staff thing, it's not putting a directive onto the petitioner. We'd like just to have a little bit of flexibility on that, so we're just suggesting that maybe you could just eliminate that entire sentence altogether. And that way, through our procedures as Abby implements procedural changes, she can just make directives as to when things are done without relying on the bylaws for that part of it.
And I think we need a motion for this, correct, for these changes?
Yes, a motion, if you wish to approve it, would be in order. And like I said, I would recommend when you make that motion, striking the very last sentence of the proposal.
I believe we still have a quorum.
Yeah, John left. Did anybody else leave?
I don't see Elizabeth or Jason, but I see Dr. Thacker, Rachel, and, oh, there's Jason. Yes, we definitely have a quorum. And Bob.
Do you want to lessen the days? Is that what you want to do?
I just remove that sentence, and then that way Abby can direct staff as she wishes.
Do we have a motion? Do we have a motion for the changes to the bylaws?
I make a motion that we make said changes to the bylaws.
Are you making a motion for that last line to be stricken or amended?
As amended.
Yes, as amended, sorry.
We have a motion.
Jason
Hawley, I
Lambright will second that.
I think we have a motion, a second, and a third there to approve the bylaw changes to the APC bylaws. All those in favor, state by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
All right, I will do this quickly because I know everyone wants to get on with their evening. The Board of Commissioners approved the release of the RFP for the comprehensive plan a week ago today. It has been posted on the Indiana Planning Association website, American Planning Association website, out on our planning listserv, on the county bid page, advertised in the Mishawaka Enterprise South Bend Tribune, and I don't think I'm missing anything. Questions are to be submitted no later than 1 week from today at 4:30. Responses provided 2 weeks from today, and proposal is due to the Board of Commissioners on March 16th. So that process is moving forward. Personnel update, Sky Meadors is in the back of the council chambers. He is our new interim county engineer. Jessica's last official day was February 5th. And then Chuck Bulow's last day with the building department was January 27th, and Randy James has been named interim building commissioner while the city goes through the final selection process. On our end, we're working on updating our website and instituting electronic forms to set up payments for several of our filing fees. We're working with Frank in our office on that. And then wanted to just give a brief update on the county city building access. We had a department head call earlier today, and the plan is more or less business as usual. We're going to continue to be open on a limited basis only per the health department's recommendation. I know there's members online and members here in person. That will continue for the foreseeable future. If you want to attend in person, I don't know if you were stopped at the door and you had to get past security. Adam is shaking his head no. But if you have any issues, you can always give us a call, but attending in person or virtual is possible.
Elizabeth McCombs is back by phone.
Great, welcome back, Elizabeth.
My laptop died, sorry.
All right, so if there's no other questions, that's all I have for now.
Thanks, Abby. Appreciate it. Where are we at? Minutes? I lost my place here. Do we have motion to approve minutes or comments or changes?
This is Jason Lambright. I make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Second.
second that.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of December 15th, 2020, Area Planning Commission meeting. All those in favor, state by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same
Aye.
sign. Motion carries. Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Jason Lambright will make a motion that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
Motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor, state by saying aye.
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 Thank you, everybody.